Hi everyone, welcome to Lola's Frugal Life. This is episode number 186, and today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of credit cards. So please stick around for a few quick words from our sponsor and we'll get right into the show. Okay, so today I just wanted to talk about credit cards. So many people have a very strong opinion about credit cards, whether you should have them, whether you shouldn't. Even if you pay them in full every month, some people still do not believe you should even take the risk of putting yourself in the situation where you might possibly make a choice to not pay it in full that month and you build up credit card debt. And obviously anyone who follows Dave Ramsey, you know he's definitely against credit cards for any reason, any debt for any reason. So there's a lot of opinions both ways. So I do use a credit card, but I definitely see the risks involved in using them. And I think it does require some thought to make your own personal decision on whether you feel comfortable with using them or not. So today I just wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons of using credit cards and some things to consider in making your decision whether or not you feel comfortable with having them as a financial tool. So some of the pros of using a credit card, one of them is that if your card number gets stolen and if you have like fraudulent charges on your account, you have more protections with a credit card than you do with a debit card. If someone makes a fraudulent purchase on your debit card, you'll most likely have those funds made unavailable for a period of time while the bank completes the dispute process. So the banks are really pretty good about resolving those disputes. So it's not really that you're at so much risk of losing the money. It's more that if you have a debit card for your checking account where you're paying bills and maybe you have some checks coming in to clear and you have some fraudulent charges that are holding up those funds, you could have problems with accessing your money with these checks coming in, or even if you need to make a withdrawal or whatever situation why you might need those funds for something else in your account, you could have a problem while you're waiting for this dispute to be resolved. You won't have that with a credit card for the most part. At least my understanding with what I have, and I believe with most credit cards, is that when you file a dispute, they don't hold that against your available credit. So you're not really at risk of having those charges impact you as long as you report it, timely. So that's one of the pros of a credit card. You have a little bit more protection there as far as if there's fraudulent activity. By using a credit card and regularly paying it each month, it can help you build up a good credit score if that's something that you're interested in for maybe a future home purchase or refinancing your home, purchasing a car, things like that. If you have a really good credit score, you'll be eligible to receive the best interest rates on those types of loans. So it can definitely save you money in the long term by getting better rates on those type of long-term financings and not having to pay a higher interest rate because you don't have good credit or you don't have any credit, which would make it even harder to get those loans. Another pro of credit cards is that you can earn rewards on your purchases, either cash back. There's a lot of travel rewards. There's all different kinds. There's like a Disney credit card where you earn points you can use at Disney. There's all different types of reward cards that you can gear towards what's the best benefit for you. I know that I've heard a lot about the travel rewards cards. I've never really gotten into them. It is something I'm a little bit interested into looking into because it did sound like you could get some great deals on travel by using those, but I don't know anything about it. I currently just use a regular cashback card that I felt had the best rewards, like percentages for cash back based on the different purchases that I make. So that's what I went with. And I felt like I got a pretty good amount back each year. So I was pretty happy with using that card. But the whole thing is if you're using a card for these rewards, you really have to make sure that you're paying the card in full each month so that you don't wind up paying interest to receive rewards and then it kind of cancels itself out. So if you're using it solely to earn those rewards, that really should be your main goal, and not to be using it to as a source of credit where you're not going to be paying it full each month. Another pro of credit cards is that many credit cards do offer expense tracking tools that can help you in reviewing your expenses and comparing to budget to kind of see where your money's going if you're not that good at keeping track and having like your own spreadsheet or other methods. That can be a tool that you can definitely use to track your expenses. It also makes, most of them are pretty easy to link to your banking software, so you can download your activity. I'm not saying that a regular checking account doesn't do that also, but it's pretty easy to track. You can keep on top of it every day. So these are just kind of some of the pros, some of the reasons that credit cards can be useful to have. I also know they do also offer, some cards also offer some other protections as far as warranties on purchases, or other protections if you don't get something delivered or it wasn't what you thought it was, or things like that. I've never really used any of those types of features, but I definitely read about them all the time, so that's something else to consider too, that you might want to find out about the particular card if you were going to be using one. Some cons of credit cards. There's a lot of cons for credit cards. So the first one, of course, which I think we are all familiar with, is that credit cards can be very tempting when you see that you have these large available balances to spend. Often they give you lines of credit that are just ridiculous, and they're so enormous that it can make in some cases, that it can make people feel like they just have this unlimited source of money, and it can become really easy to justify being able to try and just pay it off next month, or we'll get that paid off in a couple months, and then we won't use this card anymore, and then something else comes up next month, and now you need that money for something else, and now you have this balance you're carrying, and it can be very tempting knowing that those funds are there and easily available for you to use. So that's definitely a con of credit cards. Another thing is that if your payment is not made timely and in full, as you know, you will incur interest charges, and often at pretty high rates. And if your payment is made late by accident, even like a day, you'll also usually get hit with pretty high late fees, and sometimes they will even then increase your interest rate. So you have to be really careful with making sure that you're very timely with making your payments and making sure you get them paid in full and on time, so that you're not getting charged interest. Making a purchase with a credit card can sometimes cause you to incur additional fees. So you just need to be aware of that. So this isn't super common, but it definitely does happen. Usually with things like government agencies or schools or things like that. Sometimes you'll notice that they'll give you like different payment options where you can choose to pay with like an electronic check or a credit card, or I don't know, maybe there might be a third option, but I think it's usually probably just those two. But it'll say, if you pay with a credit card, we're going to charge you a fee of, say, 1.5% or something like that. So if you look at, if you don't look at that and you're not aware, you could wind up getting a really large fee added for using a credit card. I did this once when making my property tax payment to the township that I live in, because I thought, it'll be so great. I'm going to pay my property tax payment with my credit card, and it's such a large amount. I'm going to get this big, cash reward back for using my credit card to make this payment. But I guess I didn't really fully read it or calculate it properly or whatever. And honestly, it was a while ago. It was a pretty long time ago. And I don't remember the details of exactly what I got charged and what my cashback reward was. But either way, I do remember that the charge that I paid definitely exceeded the rewards that I got back. So I was really disappointed in myself in not, looking at that better and making sure I understood what I was doing before I just went ahead and made the payment. So you just want to be sure that you're not going to be paying any additional fees on your purchase because you're using a credit card. Some small businesses are doing this now too, where they don't actually say that they're charging you a fee for using your credit card, but they are giving you a discount for using cash. So essentially, you're paying more because you're using a credit card because they don't want to have to pay the fees that they pay for the credit card, that the credit card company charges them for using the service. So you just want to kind of, that's a con, that could potentially be a con of credit cards. You just want to kind of keep, be aware and make sure that you're looking at all the information before you choose to make a payment with a credit card. Another con is, this isn't really a con of a credit card, it's more like a financing con, I guess, but it's always usually associated with store credit cards. Those zero interest plans offered on store credit cards. Best Buy is famous for this. I'm sure there's definitely others, but you'll go into Best Buy and let's say, oh, you can get this great TV and sound system and all this, fancy stuff, and you can pay it off over the next 18 months with no interest. So people get sucked into that. It sounds like a really great deal. And, they'll figure out how much the monthly payment is and they say, okay, well, we can do that each month. And, it's funny because I kind of tried to explain this to one of my kids with, because they're saying, well, what's wrong with that? You have this no interest and you get to pay it off over all this time. And, I can afford that monthly amount. My kids don't have debt. They're still teenagers, but we were just kind of talking through how this works. And I said, yeah, but how do you know that for the next 18 months you're going to have that extra $50 to pay on this TV? Like, what if something else comes up? What if you have an emergency? You're not guaranteed that you have that $50, and then maybe you enter into another deal that's another, $65 a month now. And now you have the 50 and the 65, and now you're trying to pay all these things, and yeah, you got no interest, but you're struggling because you have to make sure that you can make these payments for the rest of this period of time. But the bigger problem with those zero interest payment plans is that they're not really zero interest. They're only zero interest if you make sure to pay the purchase in full before the offer expires. If you pay that full balance the next month on month 19, you're going to get hit with a charge for the interest for that entire period of time that you made that purchase for. Not just for the balance that was remaining, but for the entire purchase. You have to pay the entire purchase in full by the time that offer expires. So you have to be, if you did do one of those, you have to be really, really careful with making sure that those payments are made timely. Have I done them in the past? Yes. Would I do them anymore? No. I was definitely tempted into them before. I don't do any debt now, especially with things like that, if at all possible. I'm not saying that instances don't happen where, we're put in a position where sometimes debt is kind of like a necessity. So I don't want to be one of those people that says, oh, you should never do debt, and I never do debt. And, I definitely try and avoid it at all costs. But I understand things happen. But I would never do it for like a TV or something like that. That's really not an emergency. So I have done them. I definitely wouldn't do them anymore. And I definitely encourage my kids to never do those types of things because it's just a bad idea and you can really get yourself hit with a lot of extra costs that you weren't expecting if you are not able to wind up paying it off in time. So that's those. Another con of credit cards is 0% interest balance transfers. So if you find yourself in a position where you have accumulated credit card debt that you're trying to pay off, you might see a 0% balance transfer offer and think, oh my gosh, this is great. I can transfer this money and pay it off with no interest, and it'll help me, get out of debt sooner. That definitely can be true. But one thing that you have to consider is that when you're doing a transfer, even though there's 0% interest on the amount you transfer, there is a fee. I've never seen one without a fee. So you need to check and see what that fee is. It's usually a flat percentage. So maybe if you're transferring over $5,000, you might be charged a flat 4% fee on that $5,000. So what you need to figure out is how long is it going to take you to pay this debt off? And what would your interest be in the normal amount of time you're going to pay it off as that compares to what that flat fee is that the bank is going to charge you for transferring your debt over to them to get the 0% interest rate. So you need to make sure that you understand that and look at what that amount is before you move forward with making this transfer. Because if you were going to pay it off in a couple of months anyway, or 6 months or whatever, it might not even be worth the time to transfer it, depending on what your interest rate is and what the fee is going to be. So it's just something that you need to be aware of and you need to think about. And also remember that when you do that balance transfer, you now have cleared up the available credit on your other card, which also can put people into tempting positions again because now they have more credit freed up. So you just kind of need to be mindful of that and make sure that you're not setting yourself up now to use that other credit to make other purchases, and now you're back in the same situation but worse. The final con that I have noted for credit cards is cash advances. So I think some people don't realize that when they take a cash advance, you get charged a fee up front for taking a cash advance from your credit card. For the most part, there may be cards that don't have this, I'm not sure. But for the most part, credit cards, if you need a cash advance from the card, they're going to charge you a fee to take that money as a cash advance. And not only do you get that upfront fee, but until you pay that cash advance back in full, you're usually charged a much higher interest rate on that amount of borrowings than on your regular purchases. So if you're in a situation where you need to take a cash advance from your credit card, really consider what the costs are and if it's something that you really truly feel like you need to do. So those are kind of the pros and cons. I definitely feel like I had a lot more cons here than pros. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use a credit card. Like I said, it's a very personal decision. Some things that you might need to consider in making your decision is how disciplined are you in tracking your spending to ensure that you can pay your credit card payment in full each month. If you're not to that point yet, where you're very disciplined with your spending, and making sure that you have enough money for what you've put on that credit card to pay it in full each month, it might not be a good option for you yet. Or you might want to maybe have something with a very small credit limit so that you're not at risk of overspending and ending up with a balance. Because once you have a balance, unless you make a dramatic change in how you're using the credit card, you're likely going to wind up accumulating debt, because if you have a balance that you couldn't pay from last month and then you use it in the same way this month as you did last month, you're likely not going to be able to pay off the current month's activity plus the balance that you still carried from last month, and it can just turn into a really bad cycle. So you just really need to be very confident that you are disciplined in tracking your spending, knowing what you put on the card, and knowing what you're going to have to pay when that bill comes so that you can make sure you're going to be able to pay it in full each month. You might want to ask yourself, do you give in to temptation easily? And be honest with yourself. If you know that you're going to know that you have this credit available and you're going to be in a store and see something really amazing that you'd love to have, and you're going to kind of on a whim make a purchase and put it on the credit card and say you'll kind of figure it out later, you might not want to tempt yourself with that, because again, you can get yourself in a bad situation where you have this debt that you have to try and get out of. You might also want to consider if you have enough saved for emergencies to eliminate the temptation of using the credit card for emergencies. So a lot of people will say, oh, I have this credit card just for an emergency, and if something comes up, at least I have this to use. So ideally, if a credit card is going to be for an emergency, you really want that to try and be your absolute last resort. So you want to try and have an emergency fund if you don't have one. Whatever you can do to start building up an emergency fund, even if it's just a little bit at a time, start putting some money away so that when an emergency comes up, you don't have to rely on a credit card. I'm not saying that sometimes you might not have to put some on a credit card because you just don't have enough in your emergency fund yet, and sometimes things just come up that are huge, but you want to try and be working on building that emergency fund so that your credit card is not for emergencies, because you can definitely get yourself into debt in that way. And I think sometimes by having credit available, we might make other choices than we might make if we didn't have the credit available. Like, we might be more creative in thinking of other options to deal with emergencies than what we might make if we feel like we have these funds available to make different choices. When you don't have that credit available, you often have to think of other ways to deal with something when an emergency comes up. Like, you might have to just wait if it's not a true life or death situation. For example, say if your air conditioning breaks and you don't have the money to pay for it, and you're not living in a climate where you're going to literally have like health situation because of your air. You might just be a little hot, but maybe you can survive for a period of time while you save up to get the air conditioning fixed. But if you have a credit card available, you might just wind up saying, okay, well, this is an emergency, let's just get it done. And now you have this credit card debt that you have to pay off, and then your car breaks. So now you have this car payment, a payment to make a car repair, and then you also have this air conditioning bill that you have to pay off in the credit card. Well, maybe if you didn't have that credit available, you would have said, well, let's hold off and save up for the air conditioning. And then when the car repair happened, you'd say, oh, thank goodness we didn't do that air conditioning repair yet, because this was so much more important to take care of. So obviously, these are all personal decisions. I'm just kind of sharing an example of some things you might want to consider in whether you feel comfortable with having a credit card or not, and whether you feel like it could put you in those tempting situations like that, where you might wind up using it for an emergency that maybe you could have dealt with in a different way if you didn't have those funds available. So just my final thought on credit cards. It's just very important to know that you'll be able to treat the purchases you make on your credit card as if the money was coming out of your checking account right now. That's what I feel is the best way to know that you're going to be able to pay your bill in full. Anything that you're putting on that card, you should kind of treat it as if that money is no longer available to spend in your checking account. That way, when the bill comes, you already have the money aside. You can just pay it and move on. So those are my thoughts on credit cards. Hopefully maybe this could provide some helpful information on whether you want to continue with them or stop with them or get one if you're younger. But it's not something that should be taken lightly. I feel like definitely a lot of thought should be put into using credit cards, and just really being honest with yourself on how you handle having that type of access to credit, and if you feel like you could get in trouble with it, or if you feel like you've developed the skills to be very careful with something like that, and making sure that you use it very responsibly. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to reach me for any reason, you can reach me at facebook.com/Lola's I'd love to hear any comments, episode suggestions, anything like that. You can also email me at lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. We also have a private listeners group at facebook.com/groups/LolasFrugalLife. You could submit a request to join. I check it pretty much every day. I do also have a YouTube channel. It's not videos, though. It's really just the same exact thing you're hearing here. The only thing that's kind of neat about it is that I was able to categorize the podcasts by episode category. So if you just wanted to listen to frugal topics, or you just wanted to listen to meal plan episodes or anything like that, they're all kind of grouped together. So that's available if you're interested. And don't forget to subscribe. And if you would like to leave a rating or review, that would be really helpful to me. It's supposed to really help the show in new listeners finding the show in the search results. There's also a link to financially support the show if you're interested in that. And that's it for today. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a really awesome day.